something up here and I say anything offensive, I'll try not to. So I'm really pleased to have Andy Opel here tonight. He's kind of a Renaissance man. He's a media scholar and a scholar artist / filmmaker, and a gentleman as well, I believe. That's always helpful. And currently he's the director of digital media production, or I guess you just changed your position, but formerly the director of digital media production at the School of Communication at Florida State University, where he was for 15 years running the show. And he's in Europe right now because he has a Fulbright Scholarship. He's working in Norway, and he's going to be presenting the current work that he's doing while he's in Europe. So he was fortunate to arrive just in time for the coronavirus, and had to alter his plans slightly because they were going to go to Venice. But in any case, we're safe for at least a few more days here in Rome. So what's funny about Andy is it turns out that several of us have been teaching his research, and we didn't even know that. I mean, my first time I taught media and the environment, I had two of your articles, the one about bottled water and the one about nature is corporations are natural. And so my whole journey as an environmental communications scholar, in a way, starts with some of Andy's research. So he was way at the in 2008, when I was just getting started, he was already there. He'd already written a bunch of stuff. And in the 2008 and the early 2000s, there wasn't really that many scholars doing environmental communication. Now it's exploding, thank God. But he's also done a lot of interesting research around surveillance, and so Professor Macaulay's been teaching some of his articles, so you might have been reading him in your classes and didn't even realize it. So he's a published researcher, but he's also a documentary filmmaker. And another new thing I learned is that he's a children's book author, which is amazing. So he really is a Renaissance man. And I also found out that the warehouse that stores your books burned down. So he has a GoFundMe campaign, I guess, because all the back copies of his children's book got destroyed in this fire. So maybe you can share the at the end the GoFundMe campaign. Buy, if you have kids, you can buy some of his books. So that's my very brief introduction to. I want to get him up here and I want to get off, but I do want to say one thing in terms of why his work is important and why we wanted him here and why he's part of the 3D series. So one of the main problems we have in trying to communicate the climate crisis is that in many ways it doesn't really touch our senses because it's projected in terms of global scale and into the future in ways that is not the same as everyday normal human scale that we experience, unless of course you're in the middle of a drought or a disaster, then you get to experience it firsthand. But for a lot of people, it's almost an abstraction. We know the science tells us that we're heading off a cliff almost if we don't do something, but we don't experience it viscerally. So one of the strengths of media is not only that it helps us gain empathy, but it allows our senses to experience something that normally our senses may not come into contact with. So this is one of the huge, big challenges that environmental communicators are experiencing. So Andy is at the forefront of developing new techniques to help us get our senses in touch with these issues so that we will obviously care about them and do something about them. And so I'm super excited to see the kind of things that he's doing, and I think he's going to share with us work that people are doing out there that sort of at the forefront of this movement to help us use media in a constructive way to help solve these problems and to learn in more depth what we can do about them. So without further ado, I invite Andy Opel. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio, and thank you, John Cabot University, for bringing me down to Italy, my first time in Rome and in Italy, and it's been an amazing couple of days. It's so much history around you and makes you realize how little you know, right? It's and how much we all have forgotten, right? When you look at things people did and with their hands, but long before there were all the tools that we have today. So it's amazing to be here, and it's been great, so thank you. So today I want to talk about this climate witness project that I'm working on in Norway, but also talk a little bit about interdisciplinary projects in general, and this idea of witnessing. I'll show you some clips, and then of the work that I did this fall, and talk about the virtual reality work I'm doing this spring, and then also, as Antonio mentioned, talk about other efforts that are going on to try and combine art and science and come up with some effective techniques for communicating about climate change, because this really is one of the great struggles of our time. We've known the science for a long time. James Hansen, American NASA scientist, testified before Congress in 1988. Before that, we know Exxon and the corporations had a lot of research in their desks and in their files going back into the 60s and 70s. And even before that, we had early, mid-1800s an understanding that CO2 was a warming agent. So we've understood the role of gases and changes in composition of our atmosphere and the roles that that's playing in global climate change. But our popular perception and our popular response is still really uneven, particularly in the US, but it's not unique to the US. In Norway, there's still a sizable percentage of the population that is what you would call climate deniers, and really across Western Europe as well. So it really is one of the struggles, and that's what motivated me to bring together documentary filmmaking and testimonial as a way to try and get some authentic voices speaking about what they've been able to observe. Because as a filmmaker, I've found the power of story and the power of authentic testimony from characters to reach audiences in unexpected ways. It tends to cut across ideology, age, ethnicity, when people respond to real people telling real stories. And so that the power of that testimonial then is what has inspired this project, and allowed me to get the funding from Fulbright to be able to come and spend a year in Norway looking in the Arctic and subarctic regions, because that's where some of the most visible changes are taking place right now, are in the more northern and southern reaches of our planet, where we're seeing upwards of 20 degree shifts. I don't know if any of you have seen recently, just in the last 2 days, there have been pictures of Antarctica and the recession of the snow and ice in Antarctica and the exposure of bare earth, and they're dramatic, right? And it's shocking. So it's these kind of visuals combined with then the testimonial that I'm interested in. So I'm using this term witnessing, and it has a long history, and it actually has quite a bit of media scholarship going back. Shortly after graduating from university, I worked in a small Quaker-inspired alternative school. And the Quakers have this idea of witnessing, and they bring it to issues of social justice. So I led a series of field trips with junior high school students down to the Texas-Mexico border to do what was being called at the time the Border Witness Project, and it was witnessing what was going on with refugees coming from Central America, because the Central American wars at the time, refugees were coming across the US border. So it was about just witnessing, going and observing firsthand what's happening. And so that's a Quaker tradition that's brought to bear on social issues. And this is coming out of a 2009 edited volume, Media Witnessing, Testimony in the Age of Mass Communication. But this quote is in reference to human rights issues, but I think is easily applied to environmental issues. I've also been inspired by Witness, the group Witness. And this website, so Peter Gabriel, the musician, started this group, and he believed in the power of video testimony, and this group was started when video cameras and camcorders were just being readily available, and people could afford them and take them out into the world and capture live events and capture testimonial from people who were experiencing human rights abuses, human rights violations, human rights crimes, documenting mass graves. Witness has done some incredible work over the years around the world. And so this is also part of my inspiration of using these tools to help people understand issues that are often in faraway places and hard to see in our everyday lives. When we think about witnessing climate change, then just looking here, most phenomena, becomes very difficult, right? Because as Antonio said in his introduction, it's hard to see. The climate science is invisible. Climate change as a long-term process cannot be seen. It needs to be constructed on the basis of physics, chemistry, and big data, measurements, simulations, and statistics. So because climate is scientifically constructed object, there's no way to learn about it other than through media devices. We need media to learn about climate change. Right? And this is coming out of a brand new journal. This is the work of a brand new journal called the Journal of Environmental Media. So as Antonio said, the academic work and the thinking and the understanding of the primacy of media to our understanding of climate change, because we look at graphs, we look at graphics, we look at film clips, we watch An Inconvenient Truth, we watch things, like all of our understanding is mediated. Our understanding of this issue is mediated. And those of you on social media, right, your feeds, if you follow any of this, are full of images and GIFs and short video clips. If you look at Twitter, right, these are the mediated spaces where we're trying to keep up with this emerging discourse. And just to comment on this journal, as a building on what Antonio mentioned at the beginning, this is a brand new academic journal that just came out, that was just released. And when I started working as a graduate student on environmental issues in late 90s, there was a small group in the National Communication Association that had a commission, which it wasn't even a division. They called it a commission. So it was about 30 people maybe that were interested in media and the environment. From 1998 to the present, so over the last 22 years, it went from a small group at NCA. They formed a journal. First, they formed a yearbook, which was published a couple of years in a row with articles, that turned into a journal that was published twice a year. Shortly thereafter, published 4 times a year. Shortly thereafter, formed their own conference called the International Environmental Communication Association. And now, the number of journals and variations, everything from environmental education to media and environment to, media plus environment. So the number of venues and now there are positions being advertised for professors who study environmental communication with a specific emphasis. So really this area, this subgenre has exploded. And these quotes that I'm pulling from here are just the latest bit, latest contribution to a really emerging and expansive academic discourse. So, can you witness the visible or the invisible? This is one of the questions I've wrestled with as I've been talking to people, and Errol Morris. If you know Errol Morris, he's a famous documentary filmmaker, famous for the film Thin Blue Line that exonerated a death row inmate. He went on to win the Academy Award for Fog of War, and is a prolific documentary filmmaker, but also a bit of a philosopher. And his book, Believing is Seeing, titled after this quote, where he goes through and he documents how much our preconceptions overdetermine what we see. And this has been borne out by psychology experiments. And so what I've been finding in talking to people is it can be very challenging for people to say with confidence that they are witnessing climate change. And oftentimes, because I'm seeking out people who are involved in industries that are affected by climate change, their income and their livelihoods are interconnected with these changes, and I found it's been very hard for them to come right out and say, this is definitely happening and this is what I'm seeing. They're willing to acknowledge trends, and so there's kind of a bit of a theme where people are recognizing trends, but they're not always willing to assign it to climate change per se. And I think it's connected to the work Errol Morris is trying to talk about, with where our preconceptions and our worldviews really affect what we see. It's not seeing as believing. It's not that the picture has 1,000 words and tells me. Instead, I see what is in the picture. And what I see is determined by who I am and what I know and what I think already, before I've even seen the picture. So these ideas, have shown up in lots of places, but they're a recurring theme in what I've been encountering. So the UN has recognized the power of visuals and the need for visual work to try and advance popular understanding of what's going on. So they've put a lot of effort into trying to help people understand the issues around climate. And this is a quote from film director Mark Terry, where he claims, even diplomats do not want to read the scientific data and are tired of doing so. And he goes on to say, quote, a bureaucrat who said, it'll take me 3 hours to make my way through a 50-page report, but a video can take you through the concept in 15 minutes and add a human dimension that a report cannot. So even the experts, even our officialdom can be swayed by visual media, and oftentimes are looking to it because the complexity and the nuance and the specificity of the science can be overwhelming, right? So they need that mediation. They need that translation. They need a story, right? They need stories to grab onto. So I want to just show you a little bit of this youth climate report that is part of this UN effort. So this is a map where people have contributed, their youth have contributed their stories. Many are in audio format, SoundCloud audio files, some are pictures, some are video. So it's a range of formats that people from all over the world have been contributing their stories about their encounter with climate. So this is very much connected to my project, and an effort to, and this is really focused on youth though, and youth stories. And in a way, I've been more interested in more senior citizens, because I'm interested in the observations, like what can you see in a lifetime? What is a 60, 70 year life of observation notice that maybe a 10, 15, 20-year-old hasn't had the time to notice? So this is one of a series of projects that I want to point you to and encourage you to check out, because these are really rich sources and really interesting projects that are showing the power of media, showing the power of documentary voices, and of crowdsourced information. So kind of bottom up. These are not, there's no director here telling everyone what to do. They have suggested formats and length, and they're trying to keep people within a framework, but then letting everyone tell their story in their own way. So this comes out of my project is connected to interdisciplinary work, and this interdisciplinary work can be challenging in a university setting, but I'm interested in bringing together multiple faculty in the same room, which often doesn't happen, and trying to bring people with different backgrounds into the same space. So I can speak about production and documentary, how to get clean audio and nice clean shots, but if I can also collaborate with an environmental scientist who has all the environmental science down pat, then there's a real synergy there. And then if we can bring students from environmental science together with production students, then the production students can focus and breaking down some of the silos that we all live in. We all get into our majors, and we all, communication majors talk to communication majors, and I don't, I feel like that mode is antiquated for the world we're living in, and that we need to be empowering students and faculty by working together on collaborative projects. So these are the kind of projects I've been building lately, and that led up to my current project. So these are the elements that I like to look for and that I've been working on for the last 5 or 6 years. And this idea of getting students off campus into the community, dealing with real issues, right? It's not just an assignment. It's not just writing a paper that you turn into the professor. It's doing real work with the community that's overseen by faculty, but getting out off campus, getting your hands dirty, if you will. Like this is what I really believe is an ideal academic experience, because you make real world connections, and suddenly you realize this is not just an exercise that you're turning in and one person's going to look at it and evaluate. Instead, you have your community that you're working with. It matters to them. They're working on these issues all the time. They need your help. And they're going to give you feedback too, right? You're not, oftentimes in the university, we turn in things. Not everyone looks at your work, and when your work starts getting looked at by a lot of different people, then that raises the bar, and suddenly students start performing as professionals because they know people care. And they know that their work's going to be seen. It's not just like, oh, I'm going to stay up late, I'm going to cram, I'm just going to crank out a paper. It's like, oh no, these people are working hard on a local environmental issue, on a human rights issue, on poverty, on social justice issues. These issues are real, and the skill set that the students bring to these community groups, the community groups need your help. They need your skill sets. And you realize that, so when you get off campus and you realize, I'm in class, but I do know some things, and I can be really helpful to these efforts. So I think there's a real power there in leveraging the strength of student knowledge and skills and faculty knowledge and working locally to affect change. So this is the kind of the backstory to my project. And the most, the project that got me going on this was what was called the Apalachicola River Project. So this was in 2017. I worked with an environmental group that was the river keeper for the Apalachicola River. It's the largest river in the state of Florida, and it was deemed the #1 most threatened river in the U.S. in 2016. So I was having dinner with the president of their board, and I said, let's see if we can do something and get some FSU students working on this issue. It's 30 miles from campus. And so when we started, students didn't even know where the Apalachicola River was, right? Even though it was only 30 miles from campus. But by the end, they knew. And so this project we ended up with 130 students involved, 5 faculty from different areas all across campus, 2 from communication, 1 was a graduate course on social media. We had environmental science and policy and a nonfiction writing class in English. And then we had our community partner. And so the faculty met and met with the community partner and coordinated the classes throughout the semester and got students collaborating to then create a range of products on the issue. of the river and trying to tell the story of the river. It's like, why was this the number one most threatened river? What can be done about it? What were the, you know, what were the environmental issues? What were the economic issues? You know, what was at stake with this river? So we ended up with quite a bit of production here. You know, social media campaigns, field trips. Every student in the class got out on the water thanks to the community support of the community partner. So they would take groups of 20 out on these kayaking trips, getting people out onto the water. Many students had never been in a kayak, right? They'd never been on this river. So you know, it was experiential education firsthand and done at zero cost to the university, right? But done because the community partner was committed to helping these students connect to the river and understand what was going on and understand it in a tangible, palpable way, not just an abstract book learning way, but actually experience the river. So, you know, you can see here a range of work. And then finally, we also, you know, we shot so much video that we ended up with, and we archived it all, 4K high quality video, that we ended up spending a year editing together. We took the shorts and we really re-edited the whole thing, but we ended up with a 1-hour piece that aired on PBS, you know, public broadcasting in the US. So it was really quite a productive project with collaboration across campus and students getting a real experiential interdisciplinary experience. So that was the model then that informed my project in Norway and the Climate Witness Project. And so in Norway then, I've been set up at Media City, which is a unique cluster environment where the big Norwegian media companies are housed in the same building as the academic space for the School of Information and Communication at the University of Bergen. And so that's really designed to try and bridge the professional and the academic, to try and get students into kind of this more active learning space. I proposed the first semester of traditional video, and then the second semester of VR 360 media, because I've been working in that and teaching classes in that for about 5 years, so that's another part of my background. And the goal then was to try and to capture local stories and local voices and hear people's stories about what they were seeing in and around Norway in terms of changes in the environment. And you can look at this. This is the project website. It's climatewitnessproject.org. And if you want to follow the project, you can check in on us and see how we're doing. This is the fall semester's work, where we ended up with these 6 climate witness stories. And actually there's a 7th one that's being edited right now. So that'll get posted here shortly. And these are short, meant for social media, designed to be circulated and watched, because oftentimes longer format media, to watch an hour and a half film on climate change, you have to sit down and you have to really be brave, right? And you have to commit some time and you have to be in the right space. Whereas to watch 2 or 3 minutes and learn a little something, I find people are much more easily convinced and will much more readily watch a 2 to 3 minute piece. And especially if it's showing up in their news feed. So I've been working in this format. I've been teaching students in this format. I think there's a lot of media right now that's being produced and designed specifically because this is where we're watching things on our phones, we're watching things as we ride the bus or the subway, as we're waiting in line, as we're waiting at a dentist or doctor's office, right? There are these little moments, and so this format of media, I think, is a way to help spread the message. So I want to show you a couple of these pieces, and just a few more comments on these witnesses. What I found is that as much as I was trying to translate the science, I found that the scientists were actually some of the best witnesses. And part of the reason scientists are good witnesses is because they're paying a lot of attention to the things that they're studying. And when you can get them to tell their story in a succinct way, it's actually very compelling and has a lot of meat. That the anecdotal observation sometimes by the individual citizens, and especially if they're hesitating and they're kind of just willing to kind of acknowledge a trend, but not really say, commit one way or the other to observe changes, then, I've wrestled with how persuasive it is to have somebody kind of equivocate about their climate observations. So I've got a mix then of these 6. I've got 3 that are stories of scientists and 3 that are citizens, and I'll show you a little bit of both. But the scientists, in a way, what the scientists are telling us are things that we're not paying attention to, right? We're not seeing. Like I wouldn't notice changes in lemming populations, right? I'm not going to notice a birch moth, a change in a birch moth, and what that might be doing to birch trees in Finnmark, the northernmost province of Norway, right? So, in a way, the thick description of a scientist is really, there's a lot of power in that. So these are some of my takeaways. So let's start with I was mentioning birch moths. Let's start with this piece on the birch moths.
I do much of my field work quite close to Tromsø, where we are sitting now. And here we have 3 species of these moths. It's the autumnal moth, the winter moth, and the Scarce Umber moth. And if you had been here 15 years ago, the last species I mentioned would not have been here. So it established itself around 2005. So at that time we started noticing quite suddenly, it was in 2005, that there is a 3rd moth species there that we haven't seen before. And when we sampled some individuals and got them identified, we found that this is a more southern species that has managed to establish itself here in the north now. And that is probably related to a warmer climate. It could be the winter temperature that has been getting milder, because these moths overwinter as eggs, and the more southern species are less cold tolerant. And it could also be the temperature in spring when the larvae hatch from the eggs, because they need to be quite closely synchronized with the bud burst of the mountain birch to have good food quality. And we have shown in the lab that for southern species this synchrony improves when you have a warm spring. And I also work even further north in eastern Finnmark, the northernmost county of Norway. And here we have seen a similar story. There, 15-20 years ago, we had only the autumnal moth established, but then around 2005-06, we also started to have outbreaks of the winter moth. So it seems to have expanded its range northwards and eastwards. And this had quite dramatic consequences, because when these 2 species occur together, their outbreaks or population peaks tend to follow each other. So in some you get an outbreak that can last for as much as 5 or even 6 years, and that of course puts very heavy pressure on the forest. So what happened there is that very large areas of birch forest were killed, with mortality rate of the trees sometimes over 90%. And now, during the last 5 years, we've had a small peak of the autumnal moth there, the native species, and after that we have had an outbreak of the winter moth, the invasive species, which has gone on for 4 or 5 years. So it's really a sustained outbreak that is just going on and on. And when I'm up there and drive along the roads and see all this damage it is causing to the forest, it is sometimes quite disturbing to think that this is all caused by a species that was not here 15 years ago. So it's quite dramatic effect, and it's very easy to see with the naked eye. In northern Norway, really the only tree that forms forests is the mountain birch. And that means that when you have these outbreaks and the birch trees start to die, you lose pretty much the whole forest. If this had happened in southern Norway, where most people live, I think it would have been a large outcry from the population that we have to do something about this and what is causing this. But because it's in the north where very few people live, it hasn't received so much attention. I don't think most people in southern Norway know about this. They don't really know that this is probably the face of climate change in the northern part of the country. And I think that's true for many politicians in Norway as well. They are not really aware how dramatic the impact of these outbreaks is. I think it's just the tip of the iceberg compared to what is likely to be coming. And many people, I guess, especially in southern Norway, think that climate change is something that is, it's a thing for the future, but here in the north we are really seeing it now.
Okay, so that was a scientist's perspective. Let's hear from Bror Åslund, who's a fisherman.
I've been a fly fisher, Arctic char fisher since I was 10 to 12 years old. When I was around 20, I could angle a lot of Arctic char at my cottage. There was amounts of it. It was maybe, I caught almost as much Arctic char as sea trout. Today it's totally gone. The thing is that the Arctic char is one of the animals that are most vulnerable to heating. They are dependent on cold water. The Arctic char was one of the absolutely first fish that came after the Ice Age. And they populated the lakes from the seaside. And when the land was rising, they were isolated in these mountain lakes. Seagoing Arctic char, that's what I'm talking about. That's very important because the Arctic char in itself, it can survive in the mountains and so on, and where there's cold water. But especially the seagoing Arctic char is the one that is disappearing. So nowadays, I'm doing like many do. I'm traveling north because I can't be without the Arctic char, you know. So I have to fish it a little every year. And but it's kind of depressing because it's a very sort of secretive fish, and we don't know all the reasons for its disappearance, but we're kind of, we see that it's connected to climate because very many small Arctic char lakes have a small glacier in the mountains above it. And now these small glaciers are disappearing quite fast. So it's not hard to see climate change. You have to be around for a while. But this is one of the early warnings that we have up here. But the thing is, you know, seagoing Arctic char and freshwater living Arctic char, we haven't understood them. We haven't understood half of their behavior and things. And now it seems that they're taking their secrets with them as they vanish.
Okay, so the next one I want to show you is one that was interesting from a filmmaking perspective. So this is from a farmer up in Hemsedal, and Hemsedal's about halfway between Bergen and Oslo in the mountains. It's in the high spot. Finse is the highest point. on the rail line that goes between Bergen and Oslo, and Finse is where Hoth from Empire Strikes Back, where that was filmed, the opening scenes of Empire Strikes Back. You know, it's very high and snowy most of the year, and so Hemsedal is very close to Finse. And so we went, based on a student's recommendation, we went to speak with this farmer who was who had been living and working up in Hemsedal for quite some time. And so we went, we managed to go, and it was a beautiful snowy day, so that was nice, made for some nice visuals, and he was very generous, led us into his farm and showed us all around. But again, he didn't think there was much happening in the way of impacts, or if anything, the impacts were positive. And so, sorry, is something. I was hearing music. So, you know, and I was really scratching my head during the interview, thinking, oh well, really the climate is getting better for his cattle, or for his dairy farm and for his farming. Yeah, and then after the fact, of course, you always, you know, you learn after you do things. You know, go back and start to do a little research, and farmers in Norway are benefiting from climate change. The summers are longer, the snow is coming later and leaving earlier, so they can leave sheep and cows out to graze longer. They don't have to pay as much for feed. Farmers are benefiting. The growing season's expanding. So that's a positive, right? So you got to, you know, for me, I was having to remember there's winners and losers, right? And that there are positive stories as well from a changing climate, or some people benefit. So let's hear from that from this farmer, and you'll get a sense of.
My name is Ola Lien. I live in Hemsedal. It's in the mountain when you go from Bergen to Oslo, in the mountain in the middle there. I live in 760 meters. I have a farm here. I'm milking 25 cows every day, morning, evening. I think when my father was born and have the farm, the summer is a little bit shorter. There was perhaps a little bit colder in the summertime, so I have not so much grass on the same area, so I have. But now we have more technical for everything, but I think the summer, the time the grass grow, it's a little bit longer, yes. We can starting a little bit in the springtime to fix up, or we have longer time they can stay outside in the autumn, yes. Now I have more cows. There are, so in Norway I starting up with 12 cows, now I have the double, so I need more ground, it's no problem. Yes, last year was a very stupid year. There are 2 months with not rain, so I have not more than 55% grass I need. So I must buy some food, I must buy more corn to the cows. So last year was a very stupid year, but it was a very special year. The good things about Klima, it's summer longer. I have a lot of fences, I think I have more than 10 kilometers. And I have longer time to repair all of this. Example, when the ground is frozen, I cannot put the stocks down in the ground, but now I have more time for this. We must have machines for dry summer, we must have machine for wet summers. So you must have everything but I think it's not so dangerous, so we can see in the news, but for us in the mountain, I think it's perhaps a little bit better when there are longer summer.
So that is a good reminder to listen closely to your interview subjects, right? Because I wasn't listening, or I wasn't really willing to go to the positive and really draw that out of them, I think I missed some of the richness of that interview. So in terms of thinking about interdisciplinary projects then, more broadly, just a couple of takeaways in terms of, and this is maybe to some of the faculty here and trying to think about getting students out into the field. A couple of key takeaways. You always have to be wary of university barriers, but you want to cultivate a mindset among your peers that says, we're going to collaborate on something new and we're going to try something, right? And it's been a bit of a challenge for me in Norway in that the way the program is structured, it's a conservatory model for their students. So the students take one class all semester. So it's like one class that is supposed to be 35 hours a week. So I've had to work in bits and pieces. So it hasn't been more of a traditional university structure. So that's been a bit of a challenge for this particular project. You have to always manage your student expectations, right? Because make sure that if you tell them, look, you're going to have to get in vehicles and get on trains and get on buses and boats and go places, make sure they know that up front. Ride in rent-a-cars with me up into the mountains, things like that. Make sure everybody knows what they're getting into. This idea of building bridges, it's maybe different here in Rome, but in the U.S. There's some real skepticism around higher education right now. So I find that by reaching out to your community partners and by building bridges and connections to your community, you build allies, and the university helps to build allies. And I think that's a really important aspect of this. And to show the community that the university does work that matters, and the students are engaged and working in the community and serving the community. You want to try and figure out what you can do in a 16-week semester, and not try and take on too much. And finally, I'm a fan of just doing it. Don't ask too many questions. Lay out a plan among your peers and move forward. And if you run into obstacles, then ask forgiveness. And overall partnerships are essential. Partnerships among the faculty, partnerships around the community, trying to, bring people together, creating a sense of community, collaboration. And collaboration isn't always easy because people have different desires, different needs. But when you do collaborate, big, real, impactful projects can happen and influence your immediate community or the broader global community. So some other examples of other projects. This is also from a book that has just come out, and there's quite a resource list in this book. This is a book called Climate Change, Media and Culture, Critical Issues in Global Environmental Communication. This particular, Ron Rice from University of California, Santa Barbara, and his colleagues have put together a big review of projects around art and science around climate change. So this is a couple that I have highlighted here that are examples of the kind of thing I'm talking about, where people are getting out, they're using media tools, they're using art to try to translate science, to bring popular attention to complex issues. So let's just, the last remaining minutes, I'll just show you a couple of these websites, because these projects are fascinating. And I think we need to learn from each other, because none of us are operating in a vacuum. So here's the Canary Project, where using the canary in a coal mine metaphor, with a whole range of here I can click on, just give you a little bit of a sample here of this kind of work. These are a series of posters, Green Patriot posters. So it's a description of the team, and the project, the exhibition history. again, quite a robust site with all kinds of examples. So, you know, I encourage you as students, like, check this stuff out because it's really interesting, and share it on social media because, again, like, it's the kind of stuff that doesn't always show up in your social media feeds. And as faculty, take a look at it because these are great examples of collaborative art projects that are addressing, you know, our challenging issues and the most challenging issue of climate. This is the Climate Stories project, which is also similar to that to the youth climate project, where they're collecting stories. They encourage you to submit your stories here, and again, most of these are audio with some stills. Let's see this. So this is some examples or some sample questions and thinking about your story. So a bit of a format. Here's the map. Again, from places around the world. Let's see if we zoom in here and take a look. Let's see how. Looks like there's a bit of a gap for Italy. Not much coming in from Italy. Whoop. Come on. Why is that doing that? It doesn't want to look at Italy. There we go. And also not much coming in from Scandinavia either. So again, like, these projects, they need participation, they need engagement. Let's see, I didn't open up this other. Oh, this is really interesting, the high water line. And this is also offers ways to visualize what climate change will look like in your own community with changing sea levels. So I think, I'm not sure where Rome sits in terms of sea level, but you've got the river here. You're probably not that far above sea level, right? And sea level is going to push the river back up. So this is a tool that's helping people visualize that for their own communities. And then finally, this climate art. So these are a series of exhibitions, curated exhibitions at leading musicians and galleries in Melbourne and regional Victoria. Commissions, art talks, lectures, and all archived on the site. So in the article, in Ron Rice's article, he provides about 4 pages of summaries of various of these types of groups that are active right now, and doing this kind of interdisciplinary hybrid work, trying to translate science into publicly accessible media messages, artworks, interviews, films, and it's really quite inspiring to see the range and diversity of work. So I encourage you to take a look at these sites and to look at Ron's article in this book that's come out just recently. So with that, I think I will leave it there. If you have comments or questions or want to follow the project. Oh, I know. I didn't really talk about this. What we're doing this spring So I can just quickly, before I guess we go to questions, I got a few minutes. So the spring, I'm working with a class, and we've got 3 media partners who are all, one is a NRK, it's like PBS of Norway. One is a Bergen newspaper, and one is a group that develops media and exhibit design for museums around issues of science and climate. So the first half of the course, the students are helping evaluate the audience response, right? So they're doing some impact assessments of work that those groups have already done. But then for the second half, we're going to be doing we're going to be doing some 360 video, we're going to be doing some installation art, and collaborating with these groups to create some pieces that hopefully build on the evaluation, right? Because this is always a question, like, how do you know if it's any good? How do you know if it's working? How do you know who's looking? How do you assess the impact of your work? It's a kind of a core question for all these efforts. So in this project, we've combined that social science approach with then the creative, collaborative approach with community partners and the students. So it's quite a complex project. There's two of us as faculty members and 2 graduate students leading the course, and about 30 students in the class, and the two community partners. So part of the group will be working with me on 360 video and VR, and I'll be doing my own 360 VR pieces as well along the way. So keep an eye out on the climatewitnessproject.org, because that website is we're tracking. So we've got a blog, and each of the projects will be posted here under projects as they develop over the course of the semester. But then also on the blog here, if we can get this to work. Students are, I'm posting updates on my own work, and the students are also posting their updates on their work, so you can see, for whatever reason, this is not going to the blog, but there we go. It's coming in now. So these are the first student blog posts of their meetings, and so in a way we're trying to get the students to reflect on their own experience as they're going through the process. Like, what are they encountering? What are they thinking about the experience of trying to do this work? What are they thinking about climate change? What are they thinking about trying to do engaged work in a university setting? Like, we're trying to document that through these blog posts and kind of trace their evolution. And that's a technique I've used in my other bigger collaborative projects now for a number of years, giving the students an opportunity to kind of be self-reflective and a little bit observational of your own learning process as you're going through it. So, and then it's nice because at the end you can look back at these pieces of these documentary evidence and kind of see the changes in student thinking. So it's and it offers, it's a nice archive of material that gets generated as well. We'll see. Hopefully the spring will be a little bit more productive than the fall. Anytime you move to a new country with a new language, there's lots of barriers. I didn't have as many students to collaborate with as I'd hoped. So I had to scale down what I'd hoped to accomplish. But now I think I'm poised for a relatively productive spring, and we'll see what we can come up with. But all of this, anytime you're doing these things, whether it's creative or research, you don't know the outcome, right? That's why it's interesting. And so you put your best foot forward and you see what you get. And sometimes you get a lot of people saying, like, I interviewed a guy who works at a ski rental place in Lillehammer, and he's been doing it for 45 years. He said, no, it's all the same. It's like okay. Maybe it is. So that it comes back to that question I posed. Can you, like, what does it mean to witness the slow moving or the invisible? Like, can it be witnessed? And maybe climate change isn't something that can be witnessed on an anecdotal basis, and really is only witnessed by the closely observing scientist. I don't know, these are some of my initial takeaways, but I'm in the thick of it. So to be continued, stay tuned.
Okay, we have time for some questions. Does anyone out there want to ask a question? Who are you going to be interviewing in your next group of interviews? Who are you going to talk to?
Well, there's a person who's in charge of keeping the train line open between Bergen and Oslo. And it's one of the most beautiful train rides in the world, but it's also susceptible to rock slides, and rock slides are happening more because there's more rainfall, and it is always being under threat. And there are crews. So I have been working with her now to get a series of interviews with everything from train engineers to the crews that go in, and they're like these crack teams that go into these incredibly remote places and fix the train track over the course of a very short period of time to get the train line back up and running, because it's really the lifeline between Bergen and Oslo. So that's been on the agenda now, and we've been working out the logistics of that now for a couple of months, actually. So yeah, that's when I go back. That's first on the list.
Any other questions from the audience?
Or suggestions about topics or people?
Something you would like to do in Italy or Rome?
Yeah, ideas that come to mind. Like, do any of you, like when you're, like you gotta, right, it's like you gotta think of who's outside all the time for their jobs, and it's gonna just have perceptions of changes, Could be the garbage guy, right? Right?
Yeah, maybe I can ask you if you can expand a bit on the kind of framework, the kind of frame you had when you were meeting the farmers and the kind of benefiting side of climate change, because as we know, I mean, dairy production is one of the most impactful and produce one of the most impactful consequences for climate change. So it's very weird, but it makes sense precisely that they benefit from that. So I was interested in understanding a bit better how were you framing this kind of positive discourses within the overall project. So if you can give us a bit more detail about that.
Well, I think with all documentary work, you have to listen. You just really have to listen. And it can be hard, especially with something like climate change, where, I believe the science, I feel like it's causing problems, right? So that's my worldview coming into it. It's my point of view. So when somebody's telling me it's not causing problems, I'm skeptical, right? I'm like, are you a climate denier? My red flags go up. But the reality is, in the farmer's case, no, it's not that he's a climate denier. It's that he's benefiting from a longer growing season, and that's a reality. And so I think, it's one of these things that smacks me upside the head, in terms of, okay, Opel, listen, and be open to what people are saying, because that's part of the process. We have to hear from, if you're going to talk to witnesses, you got to hear what the witnesses saw. And even if it might not agree with your preconceptions.
Did someone in the back have their hand up? So there's some professors from different departments here, and I'm glad that there are, because you opened up an idea that we haven't really done at John Cabot as much as I would like.
Well, most universities haven't,
Yeah.
to be honest. And I've pushed this, and I've been working hard at it. And I found that I don't try and talk to the chair or an administrator. I just try and find a friend on campus, and I say, you get your class to meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 o'clock. I'll get my class to meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Then we've got something, because we can get them all together, and nobody can complain. Nobody can say, I can't meet then. You say, so like that's my little technique. That was my initial like brainstorm because as soon as you start getting into asking departments and FTE and people needing to review syllabi and questions about blah, 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 you know, the whole thing is just like, forget it, I should have never asked, right? Whereas if every faculty retains their own course and their own FTE and their own syllabi and their own expectations, but then you decide, okay, we're going to focus on this other thing from our disciplinary perspectives, that's where there's some power, I think. And
I'm curious from the student point of view, and I'll get to you. How many of you would be interested in doing, not exactly this project, but something along these lines, because you noticed that they had journalism students and scientists and literature and comm students. How many of you guys would be into that kind of a collaboration between classes? Is that something that you would do? Yeah? Okay. Now we have to start moving, getting our ideas in motion.
Yeah, thank you. This is great for us at this time. I'm curious, you gave us a workshop yesterday and you mentioned immersive journalism.
Yep.
Could you tell us a little bit more about the pre-production process that you're doing now in terms of going out and filming, and you know, what are you filming, and if you're working with other students that are filmmakers, if you could give us more detail.
Well, so what I found is there's not as much interest. I kind of thought Media City would be like a cutting edge space of innovation, and there's not as much interest and kind of dynamic work going on around immersive media as I had hoped. So, but I'm finding this more and more, that it's rare to find a lot of people who are jumping both feet into this media. So in terms of the work I'm doing, I have a very high-end camera that I will use for my pieces. But for my own, when I'm wanting to go out and test environments and test them for light and test them for like how they look in a VR setting, I use a very simple camera. I use the GoPro, what is now the GoPro Max, but mine's the version before the GoPro Fusion. But that's a very simple tool that is very convenient, very easy to use. And so, whereas the InstaPro 362, which is a maybe $6,000 camera, that is much more complicated workflow in post-production especially. So by testing environments, because VR is all about the environment. So for these train, you know, some of my ideas for these train narratives are if I can get in the engine with the engineer, and he can be talking about getting the train through Finse with the snowdrifts, or being trapped in a tunnel, because they've had trains trapped in tunnels because there are tunnels in Norway. I don't know if any of you have been to Norway, but I hadn't before this year, but they are the masters of tunnel builders, right? Their tunnels go on for miles and miles. But because of rock slides and these unstable conditions, automobiles and trains can get trapped in these tunnels. Both ends get blocked. So thinking about, okay, what's a good environment? Because space is so important with VR, like what the place that you take your viewer into. So I think taking people into the cab of an engine of a locomotive, it's not a place many people get to go. So that's an interesting space. It's probably terrible for audio, so I'll get clean audio of him talking in a quiet space, but then we'll get some action and we'll bring the viewer and we'll use that audio in that cab as he's describing. So you know, that's an example of one of my thoughts. But there's certainly exteriors. There are also these massive snow plows that they use to keep the tracks clear, and when those plows go by, it's really impressive. So I think some exteriors of keeping the tracks clear. There's a lot of examples of rock slides and houses that have been taken out by rock slides on the road. So I think those are also spaces to bring people into. I'll also be traveling up to Svalbard, which are the islands north of Norway. They're the furthest most place on the planet you can fly with a commercial flight. And on Svalbard, that's where the Global Seed Bank is. And I'm trying to work with some folks there because they've been having flooding in the Global Seed Bank. The permafrost has been melting and causing the foundations of buildings to shift. So many people's houses now are shifting and tilting and leaning. So I think the testimonial of permafrost melt and shifting buildings, the story of the global seed bank. There's also an ecological story about reindeer and fox and shifting populations. But the thing is you go on based on some emails and some phone calls, and then you see what, because you're so dependent on people letting you in and giving you testimony and being helpful or not, and so it's documentary work. You don't know, you don't know. But I will be going. I've got a cinematographer I'm bringing over to work with me too in the spring, because a lot of people have said wait till the spring now, because Norway right now it's quite gray, but it will green up here shortly. So.
Any more questions? Everyone seems pretty tired. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
I have just one comment just about the trains, because I think it's in Sweden. There's this phenomena of slow media, where it's
Norway too, yeah.
It's in Norway, where it's these TV channels. It's like state TV, and all it is the view of the front from the cabin of the train, and it's just the train.
For hours.
For hours. You just sit and watch, and like you're on the train going through the country.
Yeah.
And so there's this kind of, it's related to ecology a little bit. There's this movement about slow media, the idea of slowing down and not always, going through Instagram like doom, 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 like that. That you slow your perception down. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about too. The relationship between our perception of the environment and the way that we use media, and the speed through which we go through media. So.
Well, thank you all for having me.
Thank you.
It's good that there was some other faculty, because part of my talk was saying to faculty, and some of it was saying to the students, but some was